How many times has it happened to you that you're playing a game of chess and suddenly you feel like nothing could get any worse? Your opponent is way ahead of you. Suddenly, you need a miracle just to turn the game around, but you really have no idea what happened. Well, in this video, I'm not only going to show you what happened, but I'm also going to teach you how to do it so that you're the one who does all this to your opponent, and it's your opponent who needs a miracle to win the game. In this game, I'm actually going to show you how to play the Scandinavian defense, but that's not the most important thing. In fact, on this channel, we've seen thousands of times how to punish this defense, and we've also seen quite a few times how to use it to our advantage. You already know that the opening in chess isn't the most important thing. Why? Because once the opening moves are over, that's when real chess begins. For example, in this game, after pawn takes, the pawn wasn't immediately recaptured, because that would be the traditional Scandinavian defense, and it could quickly be chased away with knight to c3, as we've seen on the channel. They played the move knight to f6, which is kind of like a gambit, where they plan to recover this pawn a little later with the knight, or if in the game white plays c4, which is what happened to defend this pawn, black tries to play e6. For what purpose? So that when these pawns are exchanged, black will be down a pawn, that's true, but in exchange for what, Shastacher? We didn't just give away a pawn for nothing, right? No, in exchange for having much better piece development. We have two pieces developed and our opponent has none. Well, this is where things start to get interesting. This was just the opening. We've seen a ton of openings on the channel, so let's focus on why what I just mentioned happens. At this point, what features do we see in the position? Let's try to make this an interactive lesson so we can all improve together. The idea here is that the problem white has is this pawn on c4, which is advanced too quickly. Since it advanced too quickly, it leaves its partner, the d-pawn, behind. Do you see it? Why is this pawn considered a backward pawn? Because it doesn't have any pawns next to it or behind it, so it's a backward pawn. Its c-file partner has advanced and its e-file partner no longer exists. So here, if white doesn't want to fall far behind in controlling the position, they must play d4 right away. Because if not, we're going to respond with c5 and won't let them play d4 anymore. You understand? So they have to play d4 immediately, which is what they did in the game. Careful, is it a good move? Yes. What's the problem for the player with the white pieces now? They haven't developed a single piece, do you see that? And we're already on our third piece. Of course, this might seem insignificant, but as the game goes on, the difference between the pieces we have in play and those of our opponent is going to make all the difference in the game. You'll see it, and you're going to love it. The game continues with bishop to e2 blocking the check. Could we trade pieces? Yes, but then we'd actually improve our opponent's pieces a little. So let's ask ourselves the following question. If my opponent is threatening my bishop, but this bishop is really well placed right where it is, then I'm going to defend it with the queen, queen to e7, so that if you capture my bishop, well, I just replace it with my queen, check, and on top of that, I attack this square here. Careful, do we want to trade pieces when we're down a pawn? No. It wouldn't matter at all to trade these two bishops. Absolutely nothing would happen because we're trading the opponent's only developed piece. In fact, the game continues like this. Bishop takes b4 and queen takes b4. Check. Well, here there's only one way not to lose a pawn, right? This pawn is well defended by the bishop. It's true that it's being attacked by two pieces. Let's see how it continues. But the really important one is the b2 pawn, because if this pawn is lost, these two pawns will be hanging, meaning they don't have pawns on their adjacent files. And on top of that, we'd be threatening a rook that's very poorly defended. Therefore, here, white must play queen to d2. Key question. Can the pawn on c4 be captured? No, of course not. You can't capture it with the bishop because we lose the queen. And you can't capture it with the queen because we'd lose the queen again to bishop takes c4. So this pawn is absolutely off limits. Perfect. Logically, this pawn can't be taken either because it's well defended. So let me ask you, would you capture the queen? Would you move her away? Or would you defend her with a pawn or a knight, for example? What would you do? Think about it, and now I'll tell you the correct solution. There are several correct solutions here. The best thing is not to trade queens, all right? Although technically playing knight to c6 would be a good idea because if the queens are traded, the knight would come in threatening this fork, right? But without a doubt, the best thing would be to move the queen away. Remember something, we're down a pawn. What does that mean? It's true, we have the initiative in exchange and our pieces are developed, but we don't want to trade pieces, especially not the queen, because we'll end up in an endgame down a pawn, and obviously that endgame is going to be lost for us. So we want to move the queen away and keep her on the board. So, chess teacher, why do you put her on the seventh? Simple. We've noticed that the opponent's king is unprotected. He's right here in the center on an open file. An open file is a file where there are no pawns, so we place the queen there to start threatening discovered attacks. What is a discovered attack? Well, it's when we move the piece that's between the attacker and the defender of the check. So, for example, we could threaten bishop to g4, discovered check, or bishop takes c4, discovered check. In other words, here the player with the white pieces has to be very careful. For example, it would be a good idea to defend against the check. A discovered check with the bishop? Bishop to e2? Well, no, that would be a terrible idea, because we would simply play bishop takes c4, and this bishop would be pinned. Therefore, the defender of the pawn wouldn't really be defending the pawn because it's pinned. So, Chester, how do I get out a check? Would knight to e2 be possible? Neither, because the knight would simply block the bishop, and bishop takes c4 would recover the pawn again. Remember this well. If we're down a pawn but have better initiative, once we recover the pawn, we'll have the better initiative without giving up anything, so we'll be in a much better position. In this case, then, how should the white pieces block the discovered check? Well, there's only one option, and that's to place the queen on e3. Logically, e2 would also work, but why? Can you figure out what would happen if the queen is placed on e2? Well, for example, you could continue with knight to c6. Now we're threatening this square here, we're threatening this square here, and the typical pawn push with e5 wouldn't work because simply knight to d4 would come, attacking the queen, and this queen can't go anywhere good. If it goes up, you lose it with check, and I take the queen. And if it moves away from the pin, then we could simply, for example, go for a checkmate with a discovered check. How interesting, right? So we've come to a conclusion. The only way, remember how we got here, don't be afraid to review because it's super important for it to stick in your mind. They try to trade queens with us, right? We don't want that because we're down a pawn, so we put the queen somewhere that creates problems for our opponent. It's important to know about the discovered check. Very good. So we've concluded that the only possible move here is queen to e3. How interesting, right? Normally, if you're watching this game and you see queen to e3, you don't know why that happened. Now you've completely understood why, move by move. Remember, you can watch this video as many times as you need. No problem. Alright, so how does the game continue now that they've properly defended against the discovered check? Well, of course, we'll keep developing our pieces. Knight to c6 is a very good move. Now we see why this advance is impossible. Now we see it. Very good. First, what we're doing is developing three pieces while my opponent doesn't have any developed. Do you see it? The queen doesn't count as a piece because the pieces you should develop are the minor pieces, knights and bishops. We've developed all of ours. My opponent hasn't developed any, just for a pawn. But okay, chess teacher, why can't they play this move against me again? They're threatening my bishop and my knight in such a way that I'm about to lose a piece. Well, this wouldn't be possible because there would be the move knight to g4. How nice, right? We're making it very simple. I know this is a high level class, but I'm explaining it in a straightforward way so that all of you can understand and improve a lot, okay? We're threatening this triple check against the king, the queen, and the rook, so we're winning the game immediately. But what happens then? If white tries to defend this square here with the queen, because that's the only way to defend it, remember, for example, that it wouldn't be possible to defend it with the knight, because we could simply continue with knight to g4 here. The queen would have to move, we're threatening a lot of things at once, and the position would collapse. So no matter what, the queen has to come over to defend. But if the queen comes to defend, what happens then? That the discover check is possible again. And then we could continue, for example, with bishop takes d5, discovered check. Then I'm going to take this pawn. If you block with the bishop, I'm going to take this one. That would be a disaster, right? So we come to the conclusion that after this knight to c6, playing d5 is impossible. It's that simple. Do you get it? So if d5 is impossible, what do they do here? Now the player with the white pieces plays knight to f3 much better, develops a minor piece, doesn't make the mistake of pushing this pawn, tries to defend their position a bit, but obviously when we're down a pawn and what we want is to take advantage of the initiative, since we already have all our pieces developed, let's improve them. This knight starts attacking like crazy, and it's a real threat, because right now it's attacking a queen that, depending on where it goes, is going to get into trouble since it still has to keep defending the king. Therefore, there's nothing left to do but retreat to e2, because if the queen leaves this file, what would happen? Check, because the bishop would give a discover check, so queen to e2. And now, how do we continue? Well, here maybe it's time to castle. And let's think, would you castle short or would you castle long? The right move would be to castle long. Do you know why? Because we immediately bring this rook into the attack without wasting any time. We castle, good, and at the same time we bring one of the rooks into the central files, which in this case, one is semi-open and the other is open. This one is semi-open. Why? Because there's only one enemy pawn. Very good. So how will things continue? Well, now they should try to drive out this knight, for example. They should try to keep developing their pieces, but they're already way behind. As you can see, the opponent's king is in the center. He tried to get cocky, and now the king won't be able to castle. It's going to be really tough for it. At the very least, to castle, he needs to develop this bishop. And to develop it, he can't go out this way because the queen is there, and not this way because the pawn is there. So he tries to drive this knight out of here. What would you guys do? I'll give you 3 seconds to think about it. You can always pause the video to think it over on your own, okay? Very good. The correct move is not to move the knight away. How do you feel about that? Would it be a good idea to move this knight away, Chestatcher? Well, don't get me wrong. It wouldn't be a bad option to move the knight away. However, our opponent would be gaining time and we'd be losing it. When we have such a big advantage in the position, sometimes material doesn't matter as much. And in this case, the correct move that the player with the black pieces found is this one, bringing the last missing piece into the attack. And this is already devastating for our opponent. Here, the player with the white pieces has already reached that moment we talked about at the beginning of the game. They probably don't even realize it because they think they're about to win a knight, and they actually do. They capture this knight. Careful. It's not that capturing this knight is a bad move. Well, it is. Don't get me wrong, it is a bad move. But any other move would have been bad too. Black's position is vastly superior. Let me explain. Here, Black has simply coordinated their pieces well to launch a crushing attack. And this starts as follows. The queen moves aside to unblock the rook's file, lining up the queen and king and winning material. And in this case, we do it with a check, so we don't waste any time. So, as you can see, the first move is this queen to b4 check right here. Blocking with the knight would be stupid. Excuse my language, but honestly, a move like bishop to c4 would win the queen. You see it, right? The rook is threatening both the queen and the king. And obviously, it would also be impossible for the bishop to block the queen because that would be an illegal move. So the only way to block the check without losing the queen is to block it with the queen herself. You understand this? If you have any questions, you can go back and review the game from the beginning. No problem, okay? Alright, so how do we continue now? Well, now we're going to take advantage of the fact that the queen was forced to move away from the central file where she was protecting the king to launch a discovered attack. We could play either bishop takes on c4 or bishop takes on g4, but bishop takes on g4 is a bit stronger because it's threatening the king's defender. And now you'll see why that's so important. Check, and there's only one way out, right? To block this check. Bishop to e2, the check is with the rook, right? The only way is bishop to e2, and now how do we continue? Well, there are several ways here, but the most direct, most beautiful, and most lethal is the following. If you want, you can pause the video, okay? It's this. Rook takes on e2. A brilliant move. A spectacular move. Let's see why. Can you capture the rook with the queen? No, why not? Because it's pawned. So you have to capture with the king. It's that simple. And so why did we sacrifice the exchange? Sacrificing the exchange means giving up a rook for a minor piece, either a bishop or a knight. We sacrificed. We gave up the exchange because now we're not even going to move this queen away, but instead we're going to play knight takes d4, check. All our pieces are working perfectly. The king has to move. Why? Because it's in check from the knight. Could the king go back? Well, no, that would be a huge mistake, because then simply bishop takes f3 would follow. You couldn't recapture, because then knight takes f3 check would follow, and I'd take the queen. You also couldn't take the queen, because then simply knight to c2 check would follow, and I'd recapture the queen with a material advantage. Or in this case, it wouldn't be a material advantage, but it would lead to checkmate. There would be queen takes knight on c2, check. The king would have to move, for example, to f1, and then the rook would come in on d1, and that would be checkmate. Therefore, the king can't move back, right? So where does the king have to go after the check then? Well, the king, he can only go to one square, and that square is f1. It might look like everything's defended, but it's not. Now, simply, queen takes c4, and we keep the initiative, you see? We don't let our opponent catch their breath so they can't turn the situation around on us. Check, and he has to move. Would it be possible to come over here? Wrong. You know why? Bishop takes knight. And you couldn't recapture, because then knight takes f3, check, and I take the queen again. So here they've lost the knight, and the position would still be an absolute disaster. The rook would come in, the knight on c2, right? And this would be a total disaster. So the only move is to come here, to gun one. There's no other option, you see? So how do we finish this game? Knight takes knight, check. The king can't move because I'll take the queen. With the rook or with the knight, well, the only thing they can do is take this knight because the king still can't go anywhere. Here's the queen, here's the knight, the only move is to take the knight. But now, notice the following. I'm sure many of you would say, I'll take the queen. Taking the queen would be a mistake. If I take the queen, then knight takes rook, they threaten the queen, defend the square, and even though, be careful, our advantage would still let us win the game with good play, it wouldn't be the same advantage we have now, because our opponent would have two rooks in exchange for the queen. And watch out, that's a really good compensation. So, do you know what the correct move is? Take this pawn. Bishop takes on f3. And why, chess teacher, would you rather take a pawn than take the queen? Because we're not just taking a pawn. Watch out. We're threatening something much stronger. You see that? That's right. We're threatening queen to g4 check, and next, queen to g2 checkmate. So here, they have to be extremely careful to stop this threat. They're not in time. They're not in time to move the queen out of danger. A lot of you might think, well, I'll just move the queen while defending this square from the check. But that wouldn't work, because we would simply continue with a brilliant move. Pay attention, because this is impressive. Queen to f1 check, sacrificing the queen, because when it's captured, rook to d1 would be checkmate. So the queen can't go there either. What resource does the player with the white pieces find to defend themselves? They find this move, rook to h3. Why? Because now when the queen comes to g4, which is actually what happened in the game, white can defend with this move. And be careful. It's true that we can win the queen, but so can they.
What do we do now?
Would it be a good idea to capture the queen? Well, no, it wouldn't be a good idea, because then the game would be even. We both would have traded queens. The right thing to do is this. Queen to h5. What are we threatening? Very simple. We're only threatening one thing. Queen to h1. Checkmate. You see it? It's super important. We're threatening checkmate and we're threatening the queen without being threatened ourselves. So how can they stop this checkmate? There's only one move. Now they have to give up the exchange, rook for bishop. Now it wouldn't be checkmate anymore, and now what do we take? The rook or the queen? Again, it's important. We should take the rook. If we take the queen, we'd simply be in a pretty balanced position. If we take the rook, what's happening? Well, we're threatening two things at once. We're threatening the queen, but if the queen moves away, we simply come in with check, and it would end up being checkmate. So what should the white pieces do here? They can't do anything at all. Why? Because they have two options. Either give up the queen. If they do anything else, I'm going to take the queen, and if they decide to save her, like I just said, we simply come in with the rook, check, and on the next move, rook to h1 would be checkmate. So here, after rook, here, after queen takes rook, the player with the white pieces resigned. What do you think, friends, about this amazing lesson and incredible game? If you liked it, leave a big like. I love this because it lets me see that y'all are enjoying the video too. Let me know what you thought of the game in the comments, and if you want to take it a step further, you can subscribe to my free newsletter, where every Sunday I send you extra information and free lessons by email. You can find it right down here in the description, or by searching online for Chess Teacher Newsletter. I hope you loved this video, and as always, I'll see you tomorrow in the next video, friends. Goodbye.